What weird thing did somebody tell you that they shouldn't have felt so comfortable telling you? My co-worker went into great detail, including a hand-drawn diagram, about how constipated she was after one of her C-sections. She said she was so uncomfortable that she asked her husband to try to dig some of the poo out of her butt with his finger. So she put a towel down on the bed, laid on her side, and he got to work. After some successful digging, she rolled over and noticed a butter knife on the bedside table and asked what it was doing there, to which he responded, "Well, it was too hard for my fingers. We are nurses." She told this story at the desk to a group of at least 5 people. We were all mortified. Me. Sits down for my lunch break at work. Random co-worker comes and sits down and says to me, "So I've been watching cartoon monster porn." Years ago, I lived in Florida. My girlfriend, now wife, and I went to a Chili's one night to get some drinks with her co-workers. After they left, we went back inside to the bar for one more drink because it was still early and we lived nearby. This older guy walks in and sits down a few stools away from us and immediately starts giving us some light-hearted it about football. Then notices my girlfriend typing something on her phone. Within 60 seconds of meeting us, he decided to drop this. "Oh, you like looking things up on them phones, huh? Google my name." We Google his name and the first result is a news article that names him as the victim of an attempted murder-suicide by his wife. She shot him in the head, then shot herself in the head right after. She died. He didn't. Police came after a call of shots fired. They found him unconscious but alive. Med-flighted him to a hospital and he woke up later that day. And that was his icebreaker story. Edit. Grammar. Business partner of my then boss that had just introduced himself to me. "More than nice team you've got here. We should all go on a trip to Thailand together. You conduct prostitutes without protection over there. They all have documents from their doctors showing that they're clean." Dude was also married, with 2 young daughters. What the actual duck? A strange co-worker, whom I wasn't ever close with, decided to tell me at work, across the entire office, that she and her husband were having marital problems due to lack of sex. He wanted more sex, but since she wasn't trying to get pregnant, she didn't see the point and said he needed to get over it. This happened loudly, out of nowhere and with no prompting. What made it more uncomfortable was that she was our HR person. Chatting with another mom at the park. Now we can chat about some pretty weird things, like discussing your kids' pooping habits would be a normal conversation. Even to some extent discussing how things are going in the bedroom isn't that weird. But I've had some weird things other moms have confided to me. The one that stands out was a mom who confessed she was a closeted lesbian in a loveless marriage who has a huge crush on her teenage son's girlfriend. It got even weirder too. My sister told me she was getting her tonsils out so that she would give better head. I see my mechanic like 5 times a year and he always tells me how many Asian girls he met online and had sex with since we last met. It's like an unprompted tradition he must get past before we can talk about what's wrong with the car. Dude pays me at work, then tells me he can't come. He can have an orgasm, but then needs to use a straw to get it all out. Cashier at Street Louis Bread Co. informing me she's on her period and flowing very heavily. I get it. I'm a fellow woman. But damn, it's a restaurant. My 89-year-old grandfather told me his and his wife's favorite sexual position. Number 1 on the list of things I never ever needed to know. I don't know if this qualifies, but some drunk girl said I would be a nice weekday only boyfriend very casually, and that felt like a very backhanded compliment to drop on me so suddenly. I was working in the photo lab at Walmart. They have a policy about not printing lewd photos, and they have to be destroyed if they are printed. 20 minutes before closing, a woman comes and asks to print some photos. I direct her to the kiosk, and after a while they start printing in the back. I notice that the first few photos are poorly cropped as they come off the machine. They're full body portraits with half her face cut off. This isn't uncommon. The software isn't super intuitive, so I check the next few to see if it happened on more. The next few photos are the same framing, just different poses. It looks like she's showing off this nice dress, and then she's reclining on a couch, and then she's on a bed, and then her legs are spread. Now I have to figure how to tell her I can't sell these prints. I'm already with the policy binder out and open to the relevant page when she comes up, and I start explaining. I'm sorry mom, I can't sell some of these photos to you. They violate our inappropriate print policy, so I had to shred. Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot those were in there. It's fine, he's not allowed to have those kinds of photos in prison anyway. I was so relieved that she wasn't going to yell at me that JT didn't register what she said until after she left. Waiting to get my windshield replaced a few weeks back, an older gentleman tried to hook me up with his son. Then went on to tell me about his wife who had died 8 months ago, and his son's relationship with his ex-girlfriend. She was pretending to be pregnant. This son is also on the autism spectrum, though not as bad as the good doctor, has psoriasis, and works at the deli counter of a grocery store, where he was forced to wear long sleeves because people were complaining that his skin was flaking into their meat, all within about a half hour or so. I have what is called a mother confessor face. Edit. I think this is proper etiquette. Thank you so much for the award. My first ever award. I'm so excited. Thank you. Kind stranger. I love you. I seriously wouldn't mind being a pet by an octopus. You know, like an anime and stuff. This was said to me by a co-worker, female, while on the clock, during lunch rush, in the dining room. Loud enough for costumers to hear. What triggered this confession? I mentioned in passing how much I like fried calamari. As a passenger in an Uber, I had my driver tell me that day was the anniversary of the day his son was murdered, as we drove past the spot where it happened for, according to him, the first time since it had happened. We then drove past a building where he told me the murderer worked, pretending to be a man of God with, in his words, 4 bodies on him. His son was a gangster. My driver was a 56-year-old father just lost in his grief that day, and when he picked me up, in that neighborhood in Minneapolis Midtown, it just came out. He also told me that every single day he thought about killing the man who killed his son and then just turning himself in. He told me his wife told him once a week that he better not make her a widow. It wasn't the ride to the airport that I signed up for, but that was okay. He needed to talk to someone. As a father, I could feel his pain. His kid was weeks away from leaving the life and joining his brother in the military. He told me he was killed by his second in command right after he said he was joining the service. My bullet meter is always very high. He wasn't telling tall tales or workshopping material. I just happened to get in his car when a year's worth of hell came to the surface. After he dropped me off, he told me he was going home because he needed to talk to his wife. Over my working life, different women co-workers have shared some pretty intimate things. Having the runs. How much difficulty she had getting her BF to duck her. Explaining her dating sexual history of the prior 7 years. With diagrams. Diagrams. A kind of Gantt chart showing how they all overlapped. Mood web of qualities and faults. And a ruler as a visual aid to demonstrate D sizes. Had a super weird chick who lived in our neighborhood once who asked me if I knew the rules of polygamy and swinging. I was like, I don't know. She then proceeded to tell me some long, rambling story about a house party that her husband was invited to, but not her, because they wanted to sleep with her husband but she couldn't come along to participate or watch or whatever. Her husband was probably 6'4", but weighed around 350 pounds. He was probably the original neckbeard. She was no prize either. I doubt anybody wanted to sleep with either of them. She also told me she hated sunbathing nude because her nipples always got super sunburned. Oh, okay then. Okay, Starbucks barista here. I was working the drive-thru and some lady comes in asking for an iced coffee with heavy cream. I pay it no mind as it's not even close to my weirdest order. She gets to the window and starts trying to explain the motifs behind getting this drink. By the way, I'm not getting this for the caffeine. I'm constipated. Whatever still hasn't fazed me. I'm used to weird it like this. She continued. I tried an enema 2 days ago and that bullet didn't work at all. That's where I had to stop and go to the back to breath. I was not ready for that. My sociology professor decades ago smoking outside of class with some of the guys as I was walking into the building. Me. Is the school going to give you crap for smoking with your students? Him. I could be doing something else with my students, if you're interested. And he winked. Ew. An ex-coworker, whom I barely knew, told me she was in a sexual relationship with her biological father. They had been together for about 10 years and moved to a new city together. She was only 25 or so. I politely smiled, switched topics, and went home shortly afterwards. Of course I kept that story to myself. But damn. Edit. I hadn't thought about this story in decades. She was actually only about 22 or so. About 1-2 years ago, I worked in a clothing store. One day, an elderly lady came into our store. I asked her if she wanted some help and she said yes. We found what she was looking for and she left afterwards. All good. She came in again about a week later and looked around the store. After a while, she started talking to me. Now, I'm a pretty open person and a good listener, but I definitely felt like she crossed a line when she told me about the time she was pregnant and her ex-husband kicked her in the stomach and killed their baby. I felt sad for her, but we'd only chatted 1-2 times before. So for her to be telling me this made me feel very uncomfortable, especially since she talked to me like we were longtime friends. I was going to a summer cottage owned by my work. Upon hearing that, a coworker of mine informed me that his daughter was conceived there, in the very bed that I was about to sleep in. Did not need to know that, at all. Yesterday the girl I'm dating told me that she had kissed one of my friends on Saturday. I actually appreciated the fact that she was being honest and thanked her for telling me something like this before we were like officially a couple. She got mad because I didn't flip my it. I'm not on high school anymore. I'm not gonna go beat my friend for you. I felt she wanted me to be mad and fight for her. Duck that. Did I dodge the bullet? My coworker told me he hates ducks his ex while choking her sometimes. I was at a dinner party at a friend's parents' house, and his mum asked me when I was going to get married and have children. I told her, as I've told everyone pretty much all my life, that I have no interest in either. Apparently this was the perfect reason for her to then tell me all the gory details of her 3 pregnancies and births, leaving no disgusting physical description out even while everyone was eating and telling her to shut up, and then insist that I needed to have children because it's what women are supposed to do and that it would solve all of my problems. Yeah, I'm sure having a child will solve my abuse-related trauma, lifelong depression and physical problems, despite the fact that my own doctor has advised against it. Also, I really did not need to hear about how giving birth to my friends destroyed your V. That he considers paying a hooker to lose his virginity. It was back when I worked in retail, and he was a coworker. We didn't talk much, only a couple of words, and only about work. Then one day he came to me and dropped this bomb. At first as though he was joking, and tried to laugh it off, but he was dead serious. He also wanted to hear my opinion, but I told him that this was not a comfortable conversation for me. Later another coworker told me he tries to talk about this to all female workers, and he hopes that one of us would offer him to take his virginity, so he doesn't have to pay. Sitting with my fiancé registered sign-s new friend and she starts bragging to me how she's been manipulating men including my fiancé registered sign into doing things for her, picking up her paychecks for her, babysitting her son while she goes on a date, cleaning her place for her etc. Then she started showing me these long messages she'd sent to guys she had just met on dating sites telling them how my fiancé registered sign was her best friend and her standard for guys. My coworker told me that he has had flare-ups of gonorrhea over 30 times. He has herpes, and God knows what else. He said he can't remember how many times he's had a Q-tip swab in his d-hole. He doesn't believe me that I've never had an STD and is constantly bringing it up. I don't know what compels this man to constantly talk about STDs, but he must have a forest fire going on down there. I was walking home from school once when some kid started walking next to me. Had never seen this dude before, and he's starting to talk about how itty his life was, and that nobody liked him, and that he was getting bullied by literally everyone, and that he had no friends. The next day on my way home, I saw that he had mud all over himself because he had fell into a muddy pit, and he was screaming at a little kid that was probably 6 years younger than him, that didn't have anything to do with it. When he saw me, he instantly started to scream at me like it was my fault. Training a new hire at my old job. Guy was a bit off. but that was pretty much the standard for where we were working. Giving him a tour of the facilities, describing his job duties. He lets me know that his dad blew his brains out. By the end of my 2 years of working with him, I sympathized with his dad. In 1998, I was working a job at the Family Dollar. I didn't have a car, so I walked to work. It was not the nicest neighborhood. A rather round fellow walked up to me and said, "Hey, man, you got $5? I am looking to buy a rock." I said, "Sorry, man, my ass is broke." He said, "Do you like getting your D sucked?" I said, "Oh, yeah, by women." He looked incredulous. "You have a preference?" Me, "Yeah, man, I do." He said, "Oh, that's too bad. I like to smoke crack and then suck D." I said, "Okay, well, good luck." He said, "I'm not gay, though." Me, "Oh, of course not. See you." Excellent. Fun times. A young female co-worker once told me how often she masturbated. 3 times a day, as you're asking. My housemate, 2 weeks after moving in, casually mentioned he had been taking my food from the fridge as if theft was just a hobby. I brought it on myself. On 21st this month I was at a family meet. I started talking to a younger cousin who has seemed off and aloof for some time and in a itty job for someone as smart and educated. After pressing for a time, he swore me to secrecy and told me that he did not get his degree in December 2017 cause he had been suspended by the university for a disciplinary issue. His parents have no idea. We held 2 graduation parties for him with significant gifts. He had a gown and his parents were in the graduation square very happy for him. Nobody cared to confirm. He said he has resolved the issue with the uni senate and will get his degree at end of year 2020. I suspect he could be on alcohol, drugs, and keeping the secret for 2 years might have changed the course of his life. I have not told anyone. I'm the one who tells people too much. In fact, most days I come to hate myself even more because of the constant stupid that I tell people. Kind of wish I had learned this even sooner, but immediately after moving in with my freshman year roommate who I met on Facebook was when she decided to tell me about her night terrors and that she had almost gotten expelled her senior year of high school for drug dealing. Working on an assembly line, a girl I had to work next to that day explained to me why part of her shirt was yellow and wrinkled. The yellow part was cat pee. It's wrinkled cause she sleeps in it and hasn't done laundry in 2 weeks. Yes, she smelled, and yes, I told her she did. Next girl working with me confessed that she slept with 50 people at work. Married. Has 3 kids. Not sure if kid number 2 and number 3 is her husband's. Then told me not to tell anyone. I barely knew her, but I'm sure people already knew this about her. There were less than 300 people working at this plant. That's including 2 shifts. Guy starts talking to me at lunch. Ask if I heard about his son committing suicide. Yes, I did. I'm sorry to hear this. Guy said, don't worry about it, I think he did it for attention. WTF. I left immediately. I don't miss that place. All the white stuff all over his shirt was cum. That was back in high school. Years ago, I was a mental health social worker and had often very ill clients. I will never forget one incident with a schizoaffective client. Let's call him Steve. Steve was in his late 40s at the time and living at home with his elderly father and his mother, who suffered from severe dementia Alzheimer's. I was at their house one day for a session, and Steve's father mentioned to me that Steve had been acting sexually inappropriate toward his mother, who due to her conditions wasn't cognizant of what was going on. His dad all of a sudden confronted him in the living room after telling this to me, saying, "You are being disgraceful. That is my wife and your mother," without so much as blinking. Steve replied back, "What's the big deal? You ain't ducking her." I about lost my it right there. We had to get Steve out of the house obviously, and it got escalated to Adult Protective Services. I used to work at a daycare center over the summer as an aide to an older teacher. On one occasion a mom came to pick up their kid and just started ranting about how they have marital issues cause the husband thinks they're an unfit parent and how now they don't even duck and stuff in front of the kids. My buddy casually told me how many women with boyfriends he slept with, and it just pissed me off. First time I met my husband's grandmother, I asked, "How are you?" and she replied, "I am ready to die." So, My dad told me almost all my life that I was a mistake. I ruined his life and wished I'd never been born. He even blurted out I was a mistake, not a happy accident at a dinner where he first met my future in-laws. My mom told me all about it. From getting pregnant while on birth control and him pressuring her to get an abortion. She proudly stated she kept me and treated me as her security blanket, crying when he left, but came back. What the duck? Why would you tell your child any of this? And now, I've told Reddit if they wish I hadn't shared. We had an oversharer at work. Nothing was off limits. She was due to go on holiday with her husband to Thailand. She was excited that she could get her husband a hooker so that she wouldn't have to have an L6 on his birthday. The hooker was okay as long as it was only anal. Every now and then my aunt will ask me about my sex life. I always tell her it's none of her business. The last time she asked me I accidentally let slip out that I'm not a virgin and her whole tone of voice changed, asking how big I am and how surprised she, my significant other, was to see how big I am. Weirded out by this I kept telling her it's none of her business. Then she told me that when I was a baby and she changed my diapers she'd make fun of me to my parents and grandparents for being a baby with a big D. This was already uncomfortable, but the fact that we were in the waiting room for me to get my hair cut and I know the lady next to us heard it,